Call me to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is an open meeting of the Seward, Nebraska governing body. The city of Seward abides by the Nebraska Open Meetings Act in conducting business. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is displayed on the north wall of this meeting room facility as required. Disclosure of meeting recording processes is posted in the meeting room. Any citizen may address the council regarding items included on the meeting agenda and are asked to complete and submit a speaker card to the clerk prior to the meeting. The mayor will call speakers to the podium when the item is being considered. Presenters shall approach the podium, state their name and address for the clerk's record, and are asked to limit remarks to 5 minutes. All remarks should be directed to the mayor, who shall determine by whom any appropriate response shall be made. The city of Seward reserves the right to adjust the order of items on this agenda if necessary, and may elect to take action on any of the items listed. Please call the roll.
Taylor. Here. Colterman.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Streisand.
Here.
Tanyas.
Here.
Hogan.
Here.
Wilkin.
Here.
We have a quorum present.
Thank you. The first 5 items this evening make up the consent agenda.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Wilkin, Taylor, Tanyas, Colterman, Miller, Streisand, Morgan, 7-0.
Thank you. First item for public hearings is a review and approval of the preliminary plat of the Seward Rail Campus PUD Second Edition. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you so much. I believe this is in your packet. We are, again, replatting a portion of the rail campus, primarily the industrial park, including one lot labeled now, formerly labeled Lot 2, now labeled Lot 12, that's abutting State Highway 15, south of Worthman Boulevard. We have had multiple plats out here. We certainly hope that this is the last in succession. So first we had the original plat, that was the business park, that's where Ironhide Lavander's Pet Source is located. Then we had the first edition, which of this plat contained most of these lots in it. Then we had the Myco subdivision. We divided one of John Heath's lots into 2 smaller lots. And finally, with this lot here, we do plan to more or less finalize the size of the lots. We've generated a lot of inquiry into lot sizes and amenities that are desired by a variety of entities. And so we've created this plat here, modified slightly from the first edition to accommodate what we think should be the final plat here. So we do plan to pave Worthman Boulevard from Pine Street to the western extent of the city-owned property here, up to Caranda's property. This year, so that project was in the 1-year plan, in the 1-6 road plan, and we do have a 30% design in hand. We just got today, along with a cost estimate, and so that kind of goes hand in hand with this plat map. So the intent here is to more or less fix the lot sizes, recognize how we're going to handle drainage. So the PUD requirements dictate that any lot less than 10 acres, the owner, the city of Seward, would provide stormwater detention. Any lot size over 10 acres would be, the detention would be the responsibility of that particular lot owner. So the only one to date is Pet Source. They're over 10 acres. They have their own detention basin. The only other one in this plat, as currently platted, is Lot 17. It's about 28 acres. And so the remaining lots would drain into a detention basin. This is also currently part of the Worthman Boulevard project, and it would go in proposed outlot H, essentially on the southwest corner here. that's designed for that detention basin. So the purpose of detention is, the general rule of thumb is post-development drainage should not exceed pre-development. And so as you build buildings, parking lots, sidewalks, and things like that, and even turf grass, you have a lot more runoff, a lot faster. And so you, essentially the most economical way is to create a detention pond to hold that water temporarily, the big rush of water after a rainstorm, and then slowly let it dissipate. In this case, it'd be the Worthman Creek and then the Big Blue River. And so the detention basin, unfortunately, in L.H, is sized large enough that if we were unable to sell proposed lot 17, its entirety of 28 acres, if we subdivided that in the future, all that detention would be managed by that single detention basin currently under design for Outlaw H. We did present this to the Seward Planning Commission this month. They approved the preliminary plat here by a vote of 6-0, and so now we're asking City Council also to approve this preliminary plat. We do plan to have the final plat the following month, both at Planning Commission as well as the second City Council meeting.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions or comments from the council? I think this just requires a simple vote, right, majority? Correct. Entertain a motion, or?
It's a public hearing, isn't it?
Oh, I did myself. Even from, over the public comment portion of the hearing, even from the public, one at a time, come forward and speak. Seeing no one, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing and return to the council for any further discussion. Or entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Wilken, Taylor, Tanya, Coulterman, Miller, Streisand, Morgan, 7-0.
Thank you. Administrative items, item 1, discussion action regarding the reconstruction of the 7th Street, Bradford Street intersection. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you. So I did have paper handouts for you. I didn't have this prepared enough in advance to make it into the packet electronically last Friday. In essence, this is part of the Bradford Street Stormwater Improvements Project. This is the particular intersection 1 block north of where we're at right now. It's right by the Civic Center. Currently it's closed. It's been closed for a number of weeks and months. We're looking to reopen that. So as an aside, the Park Avenue project farther downhill, 7th Street, the second half of that was poured yesterday. We do hope to open that up next week, midweek. And so we would like this particular intersection opened as well. And that would facilitate, of course, with many intersections and roads closed, facilitate north-south traffic, especially since the highway has only southbound traffic. So as part of the plan, as we laid storm sewer across that intersection, as we have in many other areas that we have, several other areas that we have brick streets, the plan was to replace the disturbed brick. So as we dug a trench and put in large diameter storm sewer pipe and manholes, we would then reconstruct that with concrete in those particular areas. We would salvage the brick where it was undisturbed and then pour concrete in between. That's been done at this intersection as well as several others. So there was a little bit of additional work. We did have to drop a water main, large diameter water main. That created a little bit of an expansion of this area here. And so right now, the problem that we've had for many, many years, we have a very tough time finding any kind of contractor willing to relay the brick pavers as a road. And so I have, in the last week, I have found 2 contractors capable. They're both landscape contractors. They both worked in the city of Omaha and elsewhere. I do not have a price yet from them, although we're trying through the general contractor to acquire a price. But essentially, I have 3 options laid out here. There's several additional options if we want to look in more granular detail. But effectively, option 1 is what was per plan. And so roughly, so the gray portions represent concrete, so Bradford itself, apart from the intersection, from 6th to 7th, and from 7th down to 10th Street, is concrete, has been for a considerable period of time. 7th Street from Main Street, I believe, farther north to Moffett, is brick. I do have a second sheet here. It does show all the brick streets inside the city of Seward, a map. We have 2.25 miles of brick streets out of 50 miles total. And so this is just one particular intersection. So the purpose here is the reconstruction would take a considerable period of time, that the extra weeks that the intersection would remain closed. And so therefore, there's the option that the contractor proposed is actually option 3, where we'd actually remove the brick throughout the entire intersection, paved with concrete. This is the most expedient. It's also the lowest cost. And so I presented also an option 2, and that is essentially we would reconstruct the entire intersection with brick. So the way brick is laid or relaid is that there is a 4 to 6 inch base of concrete. So we actually build a street under the street, and then comes a 2-inch layer of sand, and then comes the brick on top of it. Typically, the cost is estimated, I've seen 2 to 4 times the cost of concrete pavement. And so it's at a considerable cost. Of course, so with this particular request, we're not asking to change our policy on brick streets within the city of Seward. It's really 70 feet out of 2 miles. And we're just trying to reopen that intersection. So the purpose of the second page of the map is just to get a scale of what we're talking about, what the change would be. So I do believe that option 3 should be considered. I think it works best, and I think intersections overall are going to be the most complicated to relay based on the different directions the brick has to connect in the intersection and interweave. And so areas that we would retain brick are more likely to be between intersections than intersections themselves. The other thing is the scale. If this brick street reconstruction costs 2 to 4 times, we are unlikely to be able to restore all 2 miles within the budget we have year in and year out in our streets capital improvements program. And so if we're going to choose which areas to restore brick, I would suggest to you that this particular intersection may not be a likely candidate for that. And so all things considered, I mean, we certainly have the option of rebuilding that intersection entirely with brick. Before we did the storm sewer project, it did have some concrete patches for prior storm sewer work. We certainly have that option to restore that fully to how it was when it was originally laid over 100 years ago. But I do believe we should seriously consider option 3. So we could defer this, and I do apologize, haven't been able to get cost estimates for options 1 and 2, which I had intended by this meeting. We could defer it 2 weeks, probably without real impact to the schedule, but we would certainly want to make that decision as to which way to go within that 2-week period of time.
Additionally, we met with a number of residents that live along 7th Street, many of them closer to Park Avenue, but some of them that live up by Bradford and other areas last night here at the municipal building to just kind of give project updates and take care of some concerns and questions. We did ask this question. I think it was unanimous of anybody that wanted to speak up that they said get rid of the bricks. Both for the expediency of opening the intersection and continuing to move traffic, and just in general, I would say the bolt rattling nature of brick was a comment last night. So as time goes on, they're harder to maintain because they start sinking and rumbling and rolling, and that can get, but
So
we did get a little bit of public comment from people in the area last night.
So throughout the city, and even on Seventh Street out here, when we see spots that are starting to subside, generally when the street crew repairs those, what they find is that concrete layer below has disintegrated. So no longer supports the brick above it. And so effectively, you would have to block by block, peel up all the brick, potentially salvage that brick. The brick probably has decades more of life to it. Relay concrete out, sand, and then effectively find a crew to hand lay those bricks back. For option 3, I did have a cost. We know that cost from the bid line items. So it's just over $65,000 to pave that intersection back in concrete entirely. That's with brick removal and salvage as well as repavement. The other 2 options are higher in cost. Option 1, it's about 55% of the total area, so we still retain quite a bit of brick there, about 44%. And so that cost to be moderately higher because there's a lot less has to be restored, repaved. Option 2 is likely, for scale, is likely to be 2 to 3 times the cost of that $65,000. So we'd be in the $130,000 to $210,000 range, I would say, for that particular intersection. It's just my estimation, somewhere in that range.
When the project was bid, Mike, what was the bidded intent in the project?
The bid intent is essentially with option 1, is so wherever there was excavation, that then they would pour concrete up to the level of the brick. They would maintain the brick in areas that they did not have to excavate. The area's grown a little bit, in part because the supporting concrete layer is disintegrating. And so you try to salvage a row of bricks, and then a week later, those bricks, due to people even walking on them, tend to fall apart. And then you got another row, 2 rows, 3 rows. So effectively option 1, we're not laying any bricks. So we didn't have a bid item in there for relaying bricks for that purpose. We're simply going to pave back with concrete. So it would have looked a lot like option 1, the original design of the project. And that intersection did have less, but it had probably 15% concrete already before this project started, just from patching from previous infrastructure work that had to be done.
I think at some point, oh, go ahead, Rich.
I said, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
No, I was just gonna say that at some point, you're gonna need to look at a map, like Mike provided of the entire city, and decide which streets you wanna preserve and which ones you don't. Cause the cost is gonna be there regardless. A lot of them, a lot of the brick streets probably need some maintenance now, arguably, cause it's just over time. And so, and what's tricky about like downtown is because of the highways, those bricks are gone. I mean, it is neat when you see it downtown with a courthouse, and you have the brick streets all the way around in the historic district. You have bricks all the way around. But to Mike's point, over time when we've done work, we don't necessarily put the bricks back. We pave over those areas like this one proposal has. I personally aesthetically don't like that. It's like either make it brick or make it paved. Like having patches to me looks kind of sloppy.
Other than the highway though, the rest of it is brick downtown.
Right, but I'm saying if the highways were brick, it would be neat to have brick all the way around the courthouse, connecting the downtown buildings with brick. So it's always gonna look a little different because of the highways always being paved. But the rest of the streets, you're just gonna need to decide in the future, what does that look like, so we know moving forward how to bid it and what the priorities are. And I'll be honest with you, having brick in areas where you want people to control their speed isn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, to Greg's point, yeah, it rattles your vehicle and you need to slow down. That's not horrible, especially if you're in areas where you may have pedestrian traffic. It might make sense. So that fact isn't necessarily convincing for me. Now, if the highway and you can go 40 and it's brick, that's probably a different story, or 50 or whatever, because at that point your car probably does fall apart. But at the lower speeds downtown. I don't know that that in of itself is a reason. I think it's more cost and aesthetics and which one you prioritize over the other.
So, I think from my perspective, I'm a huge advocate for the brick downtown. Like, I think that's an important part of the characteristic of a community, but all the other brick,
You consider this downtown.
no, I'm not talking about Seventh and Bradford, I said
I
downtown.
thought we were talking about Seventh and Bradford. That's what the agenda said.
Seventh and Bradford, I think you can pay, I don't think that's quote unquote downtown necessarily. I mean, you can make an argument either way, but.
I was just gonna ask about, as Mike, that knockout to the west side of the intersection, that's where that difficult, they spent a lot of time digging there, is that correct?
It's
Isn't there
where the water main
Water main,
had it dropped out, so we had a large diameter water main, we had a shutdown, significant period of time in the early part of June.
Mhm.
And so, because it's so large and had to go so deep below the 36-inch storm sewer, it did cause a significant extra excavation in that.
so that's why that knockout in option one occurs to the left of the
Correct.
intersection.
You know,
There was a lot of redesigning going into that,
So-
correct?
You're correct. So in the beginning, when we started the project, idealistically, we had a lot less brick removed, right? So it didn't look like option one. There was a couple more narrow paths,
Mhm.
more in line with the crosswalk areas, as an example, maybe double the width of that. So, but the supporting structure is essentially in very poor condition, and it doesn't really work that well to try to salvage brick. And we may have to rethink that in some areas where we have to stabilize that, with boards, forms, and things like
So
that to
you
hold in
could-
place.
If you're taking this brick out, you would try to save the brick.
We would salvage the brick, and so we do have a bid item for that, to salvage all the brick. And if you've seen up on the northwest corner of Seventh and Bradford, they have a nice stacked area of brick. So we'll have to get palletize it, and take it down to the horseshoe, I would suggest, but, we do have brick elsewhere, in the horseshoe. It's essentially mixed with dirt and rock,
Mhm.
so not easy to use, but we do have a fairly large pile, so. But worth saving, for repairs or whatever you might do. They're also sellable, but if we ultimately want to go in that direction, so.
But don't get too excited. I've seen on Facebook Marketplace, they go for about $1 a piece. So, for the 4-inch by 4-inch by 8-inch, which is what we have downtown. A lot of them are stamped buffalo, you may be familiar with that design. So I don't think it's a gold mine.
Yeah.
Otherwise, by the time we get out of here, it'll be all be picked over. 'Cause
Well, and I think saving it for when we do have places we wanna maintain and we wanna repair, to have it makes a lot of sense. No one else have an opinion on this?
I don't think you go
Yep,
halfway.
option three.
I think it's option 3. Get it open and let people use it again.
Is there a reason on 3 the brick doesn't go all the way up to the intersection? Is that just because it curves and is more difficult to lay the brick? Or is there a reason why? Because I mean, from an aesthetic and symmetry standpoint, it seems you would take it all the way to, so it lines up with Bradford as much as possible, rather than having the gap where the curve.
Well, it's essentially to make it look balanced both on the north side of the intersection as well as the south side. The north side is already missing.
To
And
that
so-
line.
Yeah, so that's where the storm sewers go passing through. And so west of Bradford, that storm sewer is entirely in the right of way, north of the back of curb. And so, and essentially, it comes across in the middle of that stripe in option 1, right, east-west.
Mike, if I also remember, I think the north side here, this was predominantly where all the patch was already with
Correct,
concrete.
it was already patched, it wasn't as wide,
Yeah.
but it had a much smaller, it had an undersized 12-inch corrugated metal pipe storm sewer. And of course, we had to make it 36-inch reinforced concrete pipe with 4-inch walls, so it's a lot bigger, and it's deeper as well. and that's really to drain the highway. And so all those contributed to having a much wider excavation, much wider patch.
To your point, Jessica, the opinions I've heard are just as adamantly opposed as any topic I've ever heard. So, for example, I know somebody that has high-performance cars and low cars that lives on Moffett Street that would really like to live on a paved street, and his sister lives on West Hillcrest Street and loves brick streets. And so, I've heard a lot of it. I remember when Roger Glowitz and Tony Brana thought that the great compromise would go from Fifth and Jackson to the northwest part of the band shell, three blocks south to Fifth and South Street to the southeast part of the library, and really maintain and do a good job of maintaining those bricks, because I think even then, you know, when Roger and Tony Brana were talking about it with downtown revitalization, they knew what the costs were gonna be, and they knew that they were gonna have a really hard time finding contractors to do it as well. So, it's a very emotional issue. Doris Markshausen wanted to, you know, tire salted, you know, trees.
The bricks.
In the bricks, and she was very adamant about that, and very disturbed that a lot of the bricks were paved over on Columbia.
I remember
So
that.
I've heard both sides for a long time, and I think we're just getting to the issues of, you know, time and money. You know, what can we really afford? But I know that were some of the wishes of some of the downtown people, were just like echo what you're saying and what Josh is saying, is really like to keep as many in as good a shape as possible downtown, you know. So I think it's gonna be a really highly controversial issue once you start looking at replacing a lot of them on 8th Street and 7th Street and Moffett and stuff, because it's coming, you know.
I think if you look at it just purely from a cost standpoint, you can't, it's hard to make the case to keep it in those parts of the community. You can make the case to keep it, I think, in the downtown, because it ties into that historic, you know, it does slow the traffic down. I mean, you know, there's a lot of,
Well, and there's businesses that have, you know, invested and built downtown that
Right.
want that look.
Yeah.
And their architecture of their building, you know, they
Right.
tried to make the new buildings look like the buildings from 100 years ago.
the
So,
historic nature of
yeah,
it.
the historic
Yeah.
nature, so it all kind of fits, and
But I think, like, if you said, oh, well, we need to keep Moffett all brick, or we need to keep, you know, I think that's when you start to run into.
it's gonna be a tough conversation. There's gonna be,
Right.
it's gonna be rough, so, you know, I think we're gonna be going with option 3 more than maybe we want to, but I think we better be ready to
But
hear
I
some
also
flack.
think it's not happening overnight, like, we're not coming in and saying, let's pave all of Moffett.
No,
You know,
it's not on the 1 and 6 year, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's like
I-
these small things like this, I think you can,
and maybe 20 years from now or whatever, you know, city engineer will come in and say, I've got this great way to repave with brick, and it's half the cost of concrete. Well, good for him, you know,
right,
but we don't see it now.
do you need a motion?
We would like a motion for recommendation.
I'll make a motion to go with option 3
I'll second that.
for that intersection.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Wilkins, Taylor, Tanya, Copeland, Miller, Streisand, Morgan, 7-0.
Don't tell Brown.
Item 2 is the update on the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. Greg?
Yes, so not a exorbitant amount of feedback since 2 weeks ago when we presented the budget. Our formal hearings will be in September. And so we presented that item to you. You also received the airport budget. Sydney Golden and I met with the airport authority and the Whistlers, who are our managers out there, last week. Went through it again because there were substantial changes in some of the grant funds that they were receiving, the loan funds, and how they were gonna finance their hangar project, commonly referred to as FRO. And so we finished that up and then sent that on to their auditors and budgeters, which is GBE here in town, that handles that for them. Haven't got their feedback yet, but essentially we think that is kind of settled for them. As we talked about before, they did not change their tax ask request. One of the things we learned today, working with our budget team, is their ask does not affect ours for the purpose of the postcard hearing. They are a separate entity, they turn in their own budget, they are not subject to it. We are, so we are only concerned about the .299 that we have as our current levy and how we adjust that and what we do. So they're separate from that, but there's still, I think, the discussion of the ask versus the need. And kind of being cognizant of what's going on at the legislature, which we'll get into later in this conversation, because that's probably pertinent to our discussion for how budgets will be going in the future. But the airport was one of the big ones that took place. I know I had some conversations with some council members on that, and taking a look at, is the need really there for that much revenue? There is a slight about $4,000 increase, I think, in total revenues for hangars, with hangar increases, but that's not across the board. They're not increasing every hangar. It's really kind of a specific targeted area. And so airport was one of the ones we want to visit, but we did want to present to you that their taxing request does not affect ours for the purposes of the postcard meeting. You want to mull that for a while, we can get back to the airport. I kind of give you topics and then we're going to get back into them as you see fit. So let's talk about the tax hearing. One of the things I'd like to do tonight is get a general feel. And remember, the mayor's budget was kind of targeted towards keeping it below the limit. And we had to figure out some of those details with what the airport was doing and stuff. Because one of the things that happened with the airport is they also rolled off bonded authority. They had a bond that rolled off in like 2011. It did not change their tax ask, doesn't affect anything else, let alone they don't have anything to do now. We know that with our postcard hearing math. So with that, the mayor's budget basically proposed that we come in at or underneath the postcard threshold. That should be our limit for this budget, and we should be okay with that. On Friday, we got the official assessments from Maryland, the county assessor, and also what's called the real growth percentage. And so, and I have handouts for you actually that will kind of show you this. So if you guys want to pass some of these over, 1, 2, 3 this way, and then Mayor, if you want to pass all those that way. And then same thing for these. So this is a draft one for this year. There's 3 more. And then this way. And then the other one is our official, this is in the budget document that we turn into the state auditors. This is the official document that does the math for us. That basically tells us if we qualify, we need to go have that postcard hearing. It also gives you the percentage of property tax ask that you can stay under for that threshold. So if you look at that 2023-24 allowable growth percentage, it lists the prior year's taxing request. You're given a base limitation of 2%, and then you're allowed on top of the 2% your real growth percentage. Those two add up to 4.75. Last year, as you remember when we passed our budget, we did not move the levy at all. We left it alone. And so by doing that, we were way over 4.75. I think they were closing in on like 8 or 9. And so we just wrote the levy, which we've done many, many budgets in the past, kind of our standard operating MO. We leave the levy alone or we lower it. We don't raise it. So we had we were way over 4.75, so we weren't even concerned with this math. We knew we were going to that hearing. And we were prepared to do that, and we talked about that at council. So you can see the actual tax requests that we had last year at that $2,006,456. So today, we got a draft version of this document with our filled in information. Our current valuation is that $2,006,456, or our tax request. We're given the base option of 2%. Our real growth was 2.02% given to us by Maryland. That gives us a total allowable growth increase of 4.02. That means basically we get to ask for $80,000 more than we asked for last year in taxable property tax income. It lists that total number there, and then it lists what the levy would be. The mayor's proposed budget right now has a 0.288. So if we move to 0.2895, that would bring us approximately a little less than 40,000 more than the current budget you have sitting in front of us. Because I think we're at somewhere around 36 to 44,000 additional ask. To kind of meet the muster that the mayor asked to stay below that threshold, we would recommend that we move to that item, and then we would have funds to utilize there. Another option is, and you can see that math down there, is if you left the levy alone, that would add an additional $68,488 on top of that 80. So if you left the levy at 0.299, your total ask would go up to approximately $148,000 additional. One of the questions of doing that is the legislature today and the governor passed new caps on tax asking for municipalities. We will be limited to what is a comparable CPI designated for government entities, but essentially a consumer price index measure, and the combination of that and real growth. So it's very similar to what we hear, but we can't go above it. We are literally cut at it without voter approval. And so this will be the last year that you have any authority over kind of doing this without expeditious, exorbitant limitations. And so one of the possibilities is if there's something you really want to do this year, get started as a revenue capture to do in perpetuity, this may be the year that the council decides, leave the levy alone again, let's collect the money while we can, because we know we're going to be limited later with hard caps. That's a potential. We'll talk about one project that was kind of left out that I think is percolated again in conversations we've had with community members here, but those are kind of the options that we need to delve into and make a decision, at least initially. This is not final, but I have to prepare all the budget documents for the public hearing and just pick a number. We don't have to stay with that number. When we vote and adopt the budget, we can adjust it one way or the other again. But if there's a strong feeling one way or the other from the council, if you say, we need to stay away from that hearing, we don't need to rile people up, that's fine. If you say, no, we need to get the tax asset we can get while we can now, we have projects that the community needs and wants to get done on top of what we already have in the budget, let's go ahead and utilize the levy as we have it. Let's set those projects, and we'll have one that I'll talk to you about tonight. And let's go. And then we'll ride the caps and do what the governor and the legislature told us in coming budget years, because we're gonna be limited.
Like, with the wastewater treatment, that would be something we could bond, that would not.
The wastewater treatment had nothing to do with this.
I know, but I'm asking, like, that wouldn't be under a cap.
That's a business fund, so it's not affected by any of this.
That's what I'm asking.
Electric, water, wastewater would be unaffected.
Okay.
I will tell you that session, and maybe you guys followed it or not, it was wily, it was all over the place.
I followed it for a lot of other reasons, but I wasn't, like, honed in on this specific.
At one point in time, they were gonna rob our local sales tax fund,
Yeah, I know.
up to 12%. So the new wellness center, 0.5% that we had put in there, they would've took 12% of that back from us in perpetuity, which would increase our interest costs, our long-term debt costs, and prolong the time that it would take us to significantly pay off the wellness center. It'd also take just 12% of our sales tax funds that go into debt service and property tax relief, essentially, because we would collect more property tax than we do, or sales tax than we do property tax. The purpose that we even have a local option sales tax is to offset and remove property tax, which is exactly, as the mayor's pointed out many times, was exactly what the state legislature was trying to do. We're already doing that in Seward. We're offloading the property tax burden to sales tax, so everybody that comes into the community is helping pay for these community amenities. So we almost got shellacked for that in the middle of this. It was a mad dash. I commend Senator Hughes. She made herself available day and night through the session, and then Matt Howe, her legislative aide. I had many conversations with him driving up to NPPD meetings and stuff in Norfolk last week, while trying to balance sorting out what the heck was going down in Lincoln. So, but we really need to make that decision. I think because by the 30th, I probably before we can meet again, unless we're gonna have a special meeting, I kind of need to have at least a direction. Doesn't mean we're held to it. So if it's set it at that level for now on that's quantified by our auditors, that keeps us under the hearing, so be it. If you want to ride the levy, so be it, but we need some direction from this body. What's general feelings? And if you wanna know the project, so you can understand if you wanted something to tell people we're designated specifically to, we've worked in the past with the mayor and some of you that have been on the council for a while, we've been talking about a sidewalk project or program for years. And we've never kicked it off. There's no money other than Bob Meyer's ADA corner money, which is about $50,000, I believe. Is that correct, Mike? You
I
remember?
think it's less,
Might even be less.
I
Do you-
have a note on that.
Yep.
In 2021, it was $1.6 million worth of missing sidewalk.
Yes.
Is that number higher?
Well, it just costs more now. Our recommendation was between $50,000 and $75,000 to get us started as a matching or grant, depending on what the need was. We looked at a number of programs. We think we can recommend a program that you'll like, that kind of balances a number of programs in Grand Island, Beatrice, other communities of similar sizes. That incentivizes either a grant, which is we'll cover a small portion of it or an even portion to help offset the cost, or a loan, you get more money, but then you're paying the whole thing back. And then we just leverage the funds and then keep adding funds to it year after year until we eat
Does
it up.
that fit into the current budget, or that would be something we'd want?
I think if you select this option at a minimum, I think you could probably get about 50,000 more in there. Because you have a buffer right now in the deficit, you're not in a deficit, you're at a surplus, you'd add about another 40,000 by moving to the recommended one to keep us under, cause you gotta remember, the mayor's one is under this levy.
Right.
So you have a little room to move up. It's not significant, it's only moving it up 0.0015. But that would accommodate a bit more money to do that sidewalk project, which after our meeting last night with Bob Myers, myself, Mike Onaby and Chief Peters, with some of those community members, sidewalks are a problem. And many of our,
Or lack of sidewalk.
well, lack of sidewalk and just the sidewalks that need repair and everything else. We have a lot of elderly people that like to use the pedestrian ways. We have a lot of ADA accessibility issues with that. And we have a number of community members that go around on scooters and things like that that have found problems in getting mobility within the community. And so,
Schools.
and then we have access to schools. We have whole areas where kids are just walking down the streets with no sidewalks at all.
A lot of those is just because at one point, those houses were on the edge of town and there's no real
Requirement.
push to put a sidewalk to nowhere. And then people built after them and nothing was ever done to connect those.
So I think we would split the priority there. Again, Bob has some ADA money, so we'd probably prioritize his money to address issues where they're more of the ADA side and working with community members. Because again, we're trying to meet them where they are. So we've had community members come to us and say, if I could just get down half a block into this connection, I can make it all the way to downtown. But I can't make it down this one spot. There's no way. We try to accommodate and look to utilize those funds for those projects because we want to connect people where they are
And
at now.
prioritize those trouble spots.
But we also want this to be more of an incentive, more of a carrot, less of a stick. I know the previous mayor had told me before that they had a program that went to, well, not necessarily a program, basically told people you need to put sidewalks in, and some people did, and some people didn't, and then nothing ever happened to those who didn't. And so that angered the those who did. And so why'd you make me do it if you're not gonna make them do it? And so I know that became pretty hostile at that time. And there've been a lot of, and that's kind of been an ongoing theme in the past where maybe things were mandated on people, whether it's the downtown businesses and projects there. And our approach has always been, we don't wanna force people to do these things, cause that just creates animosity and resentment. If we can provide a program, to help assist them and show that it's actually, they're getting more value by participating, whether it's a downtown revitalization projects we've done, or this program potentially, I think it's a much better path, because then it looks like we're partnering with them and we're helping them, mutually helping each other solve an issue, as opposed to just beating them over the head with a stick and telling them they have to do it. And let's be honest, sidewalks haven't gotten any cheaper.
That was my point. So I wrote that down last time we talked about it.
By putting some funds specifically to that, you still reserve yourself to come up with the final criteria. We're not committing you to the criteria, but we've set aside the money to force us to create the project within the budget year next year. It matches with I think, and will fit in, we'll give you the final numbers and readjust the budget if you were to do that, so you can see what it looks like. But I kinda need a line, so that I can put that in and have Tracy and AMGL get all that documentation together, so we can at least put the notices out, doesn't mean we're committed to it.
But do you want like a motion? What are you looking for here?
A motion I would take, is we move to recommend.
I don't wanna screw up how I say it, so.
So what are their options again?
So there's two options. I would either, at this point, if you feel like the threshold should be that postcard threshold, I would make a recommendation to adjust the levy to 0.2895.
So it'd still be under the postcard level?
Yes.
But still give us the option to deal with the sidewalks?
Yes.
Just wanna make sure I was understanding
If you
that.
would like to, before we get into hard caps in our budget next year, if you think the recommendation should be, we could keep the levy the same, maximize the ask towards taking care of some of these problems, then I would leave it at 0.299. That would add an additional 68,000.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That still keeps that in the postcard.
No,
No, that would put us in the postcard.
it put us in the postcard, but again,
Okay, I'm following you.
I think we're gonna have some friends there. I talked to some taxing entities again this year that they're just looking at what costs are gonna be now, and they're like, yeah, we can't get underneath that, so we're gonna go.
And then the original one that I proposed was the lowest of those
Yes.
three.
Yep.
Which is
But that was
over-
because we didn't know what the number was gonna come at.
We were taking a guess at where the number would come at. We had no clue what the new growth level was, so we were just,
It was kind of a shot in the dark.
we knew if we stayed at 2%, we'd be
That was
okay.
the 2.88. Is that what you're saying?
The levy, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But there's nothing magical about it.
No, I know. Carl has something to say.
Well, I just think that the fact that how long's this sidewalk project been kicked down the line, and the fact that the legislation passed with any increase on that, I mean, it's gonna be not possible anymore after this point anyway.
Not to this level, most
Right.
likely, unless if you see significant inflation, if we see the 8% inflation, you can do a whole lot, but,
But all your costs are going.
Well, all your costs have gone up too.
yes,
So,
in theory, that is correct.
So, I mean, I'm of the opinion that, you know, moving forward with it being more inflation-related raise rather than anything else is like set the bar to where we can now to be feasible for that future use and put it towards getting that project done or at least started to start rolling and wrap that up because it has been an issue for years.
And
So I'm gonna keep it as is.
keep the levy?
Yeah.
So with the keep the levy, my recommendation is if you do that, I would recommend that all the money, so the whole, potentially you could say we were gonna set aside in the first year $148,000. And we will set it aside for the community to take care of sidewalks and sidewalk program that we'll propose. And that's all we'll say is, we want to keep it the same, but we have this need in town, we recognize it, this is why we took the whole ask. And we'll explain the cap, that we have caps coming and we're not gonna be able to expand our tax base as significantly as we could before. And I'll be the one doing it because that's how
because
that
you're
works.
really good at that.
No, that's what I'm paid for, so I get to go get the,
We've had,
Stones
this will be the
thrown at
third one, right?
this will be the first one we didn't go to.
Right,
We
so,
were under.
we
We
went
went-
last year.
didn't we go to
The
listen?
first year we didn't go, but this is the third
This will be the third year.
year.
Fourth year,
And last year we were on the postcard, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
But the real, I mean, yeah, the first year we went just to see what was going on.
Yeah.
Right.
To observe it, cause it was all brand new. I think last year, most of we didn't really have much discussion, I don't recall, on us. It was mostly people upset with the valuations going up
And not understanding
and then getting mad because they wanted basically
to yell
a
at
pound of flesh from the assessor who wasn't there. And it's not necessarily their fault either, cause they're following formulas and computer software that's dictating a lot of those increases. And so that's where most of the anger, if you will, and it was people that were outside of Seward, city of Seward, that seemed to be the most vocal. That may change, I don't know, depending on who's there, but was that your take?
And I would say that I thought every taxing entity that got up, there was multiple school districts, ourselves. Daryl, I believe you guys were there last year.
We had to do it last year, but we're hopeful that we're gonna be under this year.
Yep.
Our levy is looking at it be about a .2701.
And then I would say every single taxing entity reminded them that the most important meetings to be at are the meetings we're sitting in right now. When the big decisions are made, not at that meeting that's all the way at September, where most of those discussions and these kind of discussions that we have here, where we say, what's our priority? Are these sidewalks important now? Has this risen to the top that we need to address these? Let's define that extra revenue and define what we're gonna use it for them and keep everything else on the baseline. This is where the South sausage is made. They don't come to these meetings. And we tell them, right, Daryl? I think every single person that got up said, you should come to our budget meetings.
We had
And-
4 last year and nobody came and weighed in on a single meeting here.
We've had 4 budget meetings this year at the county level, and I don't think there's been one person from the public that's attended any of those.
This is our second, and I would say we've had none. Now that we're trying to be responsible, and again, I think dollar for dollar, if you go through our general fund budget, everything we're doing in the general fund are things that are requested of the public. We're not going out and doing things that are frivolous or fly by night, but there's a lot of expectations on this city between cemeteries, pools, not so much the golf course because it generates its own revenue, the library, law enforcement, fire. These are all general fund things, where the utilities can cover in their business funds administration, they can cover some of those things. The civic center pays for itself by its own trust and the gift that was given by the Langworthy Trust. So that's outside of it. But some of these essential things, these are things our community wants. You go around and ask, they got a laundry list of things they'll tell you they'd like to see, whether it's expanded ball fields, additional trails, lights, you name it. That's all general fund. And so we're trying to get the most bang for our buck and do the things that reach the most level of our citizenry. I think the sidewalk program, which we've talked about now for 3+ years, is probably one of those that could really do a lot of good across the entirety of the community, especially in older areas of our community. Helps the elderly, helps ADA, helps children. If that's not doing what I think you're tasked with doing, maybe we're not doing it right. But ultimately, that is the decision of the policymakers in this body. So, and I'm not afraid to go to the meeting or sitting here dissuading you. I did it last year, I'll do it again. That's my task. Be direct.
So to maximize our opportunity, it would be that .2990,
Which is our current levy.
which is our current levy.
Yep. Essentially, the increase is about 7% ask. This one would be approximately 4%. The mayor's was 2%. It's not a huge amount. We're not talking millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking
$68,488.74.